All right, the Hangout's live. And good evening to everybody that is going to be joining us tonight. We will get started here in just a couple of minutes. Make sure that we have a chance to get the stream live and get some folks to be able to join us if they're going to be able to. We're going to be spending the evening tonight talking about NBA free agency for the Thunder and for the Grizzlies. And no, I'm kidding. We're not really doing that. It seems like that's all that's on Twitter, though, today, depending on who you follow, I guess. How's that team up there in Seattle, those Supersonics there, William?
Wow. Man.
That isn't working out so well for him, is it? All right. We are going to go ahead and get started here. Hopefully we got one more person that'll join us if they're able to, but we'll get started. My name is Eric Procius. I'm MemphisWeather.net's meteorologist, and we're having a discussion tonight entitled The National Weather Service in 2015 and Beyond, and have some panelists here that have joined us. We're going to be talking about a couple of different main topics, but this could go just about anywhere over the next 60 minutes probably. But want to introduce first, I guess, who we've got here on the panel, and then we'll get into kind of some of the discussion of why we're talking about this issue tonight, and hopefully some things that will help out those who are watching as well. So I'm going to start off with a special guest tonight. We've got Rick Smith with us from the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma. He is the warning coordination meteorologist out there at Norman, which covers Oklahoma City Metro and most of central Oklahoma, a little piece of Texas, I think, as well. And he basically, well, I'll let him tell you. What does the warning coordination meteorologist do? Rick, welcome tonight.
Thanks for having me, Eric. I appreciate the invitation. This is cool to be here. The warning coordination meteorologist, there's one of those in every National Weather Service office. So there's 122 local forecast offices. Every office has a warning coordination meteorologist. Kind of think of that as the external affairs, marketing, sales, outreach, that type of thing. We're responsible for dealing with a lot of the external parts of the weather service. We get to interact a lot with emergency management, public safety, with all of our partners in the broadcast media, and we get to do lots of the traditional things you think of when you may think of a warning coordination meteorologist or doing storm spotter training and things like that. But we get to do a lot of different things in the job. It's the best job in the weather service. No argument as far as I'm concerned.
Excellent. Good background. Thanks, Rick, for joining us. And Rick is also hails from the Mid-South here. So actually, I interned at the National Weather Service in Memphis back in college when Rick was starting out in his weather service career here in Memphis. So always glad to see him again too. Thanks. We also have joining us tonight. I'll turn to Austin if he's ready. I'm glad you were able to join in tonight, Austin. From WREG, broadcast meteorologist here in Memphis. Welcome. You want to say hello?
Howdy, and apologies for the continuity connection blah 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 errors from earlier. It's been one of those type of days.
Totally understand. No problem. Glad you were able to join in with us tonight. And in this discussion tonight, Austin is obviously in the broadcast field, so he's going to be kind of representing the broadcast sector from that point of view for the discussion. Also have, I'll call him the future of the National Weather Service. One of the MWN interns is William Churchill, and he is embarking on a weather service career here in the next year or so. Got 1 year left at Mississippi State University studying meteorology, and already has kind of his foot in the door with the National Weather Service. He's out in Seattle tonight. I know it's almost dinner time out there. Appreciate you taking your time out to come and join us and represent your perspective there as well. How are you, William?
No problem. Glad to be here. Just trying to stay cool in warm Seattle this summer.
Yeah, that ridge has got you guys pegged there for a good long time here. It looks like I've seen a lot of 100+ readings in interior Washington. That's quite the challenge, I think, out in that area. And then finally, no stranger to those of you who have watched our Hangouts before, representing the educated public consumer tonight, we have John Maddox. Welcome, John. Thanks for joining us.
Eric, thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
Great. I'll just give a little bit of a background here on why this came together then and some of the things we want to talk about. And if you guys feel free to join in anytime, chime in if you have any questions or concerns or anything you want to share. And I'll just remind you if you're not speaking, if you were able to mute, that will help us out too. So we have, I guess about 3 weeks or so ago, a well-meaning senator, I think, from the great state of South Dakota, introduced a bill, I guess, into I think it was the Commerce Committee in Washington that basically would restructure the entire National Weather Service. And as Rick mentioned here earlier, there are 122 offices across the United States right now that basically focus on their local areas. They're of different sizes and so forth. The one here in Memphis covers all of West Tennessee, North Mississippi, East Arkansas, and the Missouri Boot Heel, just to give you an idea. And basically what that bill would have done was completely restructure that so that you have still these 122 offices, but with much, much lower manning. And you would centralize all of the forecast and I believe also the warning responsibilities into 6 regional offices across the United States. And as soon as that hit the wire, many folks in the meteorology sector, from basically all different sectors of meteorology, in fact, jumped on that. The emergency management community caught wind of it and really started to raise a stink about it. And I think there may be perhaps some good pieces of that might be able to come out of something like that, but overall, it's something that that really kind of shook up the weather community. And not knowing whether or not that was the reason for it, but after just a few days, that bill was basically totally rewritten and focuses now on the watch warning process that the Weather Service uses to basically get the message out to the public. And with basically asking the Weather Service to make sure that they are focusing on the proper way of disseminating their watches and warnings and advisories and everything in a way that the public can best get that information and be able to take action on that information, make sure it is actionable. And so that's what's currently out there right now. So there's kind of a couple different topics to talk about there, and I think I want to start off with what the original bill was, even though it was kind of pulled and I'll say realigned. There's still some discussion maybe to be had there. I guess I'll start off by throwing the question out to Rick, and that is, what was, if you can speak to it, what was kind of the initial reaction to that in the National Weather Service community, and was there some positive discussion that might have come out of that you might be able to use going forward to help kind of optimize or streamline some of the things that you already do?
Well, there was some interesting discussion that came out. I work at a local office, but talking to people that work in our headquarters, a lot of times the Weather Service headquarters is aware when things like this are in the works, are going to happen. There's a whole NOAA, National Weather Service, has a whole legislative affairs branch that deals directly with the Congress and with the senators and the House of Representatives and bills and pending bills and all that kind of thing. That's their whole job, is to do that. So a lot of times there is some indication that something is coming down the pike. There was no indication. This, if I could use the term, it struck without warning. We didn't really know that this was going to be coming out. I can tell you that the reaction was stronger outside the Weather Service than it was inside the Weather Service. I don't think anybody in our office or anyone else seemed terribly overly concerned about it. I mean, obviously there's always concern when there's something that potentially that significant that could happen, but I don't think anybody was fearful that it was going to actually come to pass right away. But I think it does generate some good discussion. I think you said it well, Eric. There are some elements, there's maybe some pieces of that do have some merit, and there's been discussion within the weather community, not just in the Weather Service. The big word in the Weather Service right now is consistency, and Memphis is kind of right in the middle of the Memphis CWA and Austin's area. Probably pretty closely. I think the Memphis TV market kind of closely matches with the NWS Memphis county warning area, maybe a little off, but you're not one of those offices where you have to deal with 5 different National Weather Service offices. That consistency issue really comes up where you've got, one of your counties has a winter weather advisory, one has a winter storm watch, one has a winter storm warning, one has nothing. And so, the consistency part of that, the having a more uniform approach to the forecast, some could argue that may not be a bad thing, but and I don't know how much detail you want to get into, but thinking about having 6 or 10 or however many regional offices across the country who would be responsible for all the warnings and all the forecasts for huge chunks of the United States, that I don't know. That I'm not sure how well that would work.
Yeah.
Especially the warning part.
Right. Let me share here with you all a little bit on this consistency that he's pointing out. What I'm showing here. This is from the National Digital Forecast Database, which is basically where all of the data is stored that goes into the forecast that you get as a public consumer. So if you go to the National Weather Service page and type in your city, you get data that's pulled out of here. And this is just an example, and just to give you an idea, this is the probabilities of precipitation for tonight. And so if you look at this map, you can pretty well define where the outlines are of the different warning or responsibility areas of the Weather Service. For instance, up here in southeast Missouri, if I click just north of Cape Girardeau for a forecast and I click just south of Cape Girardeau, my probability of precipitation tonight changes from 37 to 100% over a course of just a couple of miles right there. And so I think that kind of speaks to what Rick was talking about there as far as the consistency of the products. You've got different areas that have to kind of mesh their forecast together, and if 2 different forecasters kind of have a different idea of what is going to happen, if there's not collaboration going on between the offices, then you see some of that kind of thing, and I think you see it even more. It's come out in the winter weather products where you have snowfall accumulation maps, and if you look at this particular product that shows all of them kind of merged together, there's definite lines around CWAs or warning responsibility areas.
Yeah, Eric, can you go back to that graphic?
Absolutely.
If you're not familiar with the Weather Service county warning areas, I mean, you can see some of the sharp boundaries on this graphic. They're in eastern Arkansas. There's a pretty sharp boundary there. You can see the Memphis County warning area in the darker green there in northeast Arkansas. And then the Paducah office goes up into southeast Missouri, and then when you go from the Paducah office where Cape Girardeau is up to the example you were pointing out to where the St. Louis office is in those very lighter green shadings. This is a consistency issue. We would rather, or you really shouldn't be able to pick out county warning areas on a map like this. The weather doesn't know those boundaries are there, and the forecast, really shouldn't know those boundaries. This is an issue that's not new, and it's not something that's just popped up overnight, but it's something that Weather Service is making a concerted effort to get better at right now.
One of the things that would concern me from the regional forecast perspective is, Eric, Austin, we always joke around here about winter weather forecasting. Well, where do you put Memphis? If you're going to regionalize this thing, say, okay, we're going to put Memphis in the southeast. Well, are the guys in the southeast office really going to know that I know what you're saying, Rick, but every storm knows where I-40 is. I don't care what you say. Nobody's going to tell me different, but it just seems like, every storm sets up on I-40 is kind of, so is a guy sitting in the Peachtree, Georgia, Atlanta office really going to understand Memphis? Parts of the country you can kind of group together. The Midwest is pretty close together, but out west, but, our portion of the country, say from your office over towards Morristown, Tennessee, that little whatever box you build there from St. Louis to maybe Little Rock over to Norman up to Knoxville down to Jackson, Mississippi, we have some of the weirdest weather in the country. So where do you put where do you put those guys? So I think that's the real danger with regionalization is you'll have a large segment of, let's be honest, what we call flyover country that we won't really have a home. We will be kind of the nomads. So do you put all of us together? Well, no, our weather is completely different from East Tennessee. So I just think there's a lot of danger in 6 to 10 offices like that of leaving large metropolitan areas such as Memphis and Little Rock and Nashville kind of out to dry, so to speak.
Well, when I started in the Weather Service, there was there was one forecast office in every state. Now, some had more, Texas had more, but there was one forecast office for the whole state of Tennessee, and it was in Memphis. So the Memphis WSFO did the forecast for all 102 counties in the state of Tennessee. And I remember trying to do the forecast for Crossville and Gatlinburg and Knoxville and Chattanooga from all the way over in Memphis. I mean, Tennessee is a big, long state, or 3 states, some might say, but that's a lot of area. I can't imagine doing the forecast for all of Tennessee and all of Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, a region. There's a lot of localization, a lot of regionalization that goes into forecasts that makes a big difference, I think, and that local forecaster knowledge and that local expertise, both at the Weather Service and at the media level, makes a big difference. What if you only had one TV network that tried to do weather for the whole United States? How would that work?
They'd probably show fat guys in the woods.
Austin, was that directed to you?
I tried to lose weight as much as possible, so I don't think I'd be on there.
No, not the station, not the programming. Austin? Where do you see some of this inconsistency between CWAs and stuff? I know your viewing area kind of is pretty much fully encapsulated within the Memphis warning area, but how do you deal with that? And when you're explaining to the public, some of that kind of thing, maybe.
Well, when it comes to anything involving tornado warnings or anything else of that nature, to where you are going to have the information parsed out for that, you're going to have anything involving the warning situation that says that, okay, the designated market area for a particular location will show that your broadcast signal goes to a certain space, certain spot, and then another TV station will take over from there. So like National Weather Service forecast offices, and part of what we've been talking about here and in some of the links that you sent over, showing especially like where the tornado warning in West Virginia crossed the river and had that weird sort of omega look to it, because the warning officer on one side of the river didn't quite like the idea of issuing a severe tornado warning, so he issued a severe thunderstorm warning. Yeah, exactly, that one right there. It's the same thing for us, too, where we have those warnings coming on through. When I was in Fort Smith, Arkansas, back in 1996, National Weather Service in Tulsa, the only radar they had was in Tulsa, and when the tornadic thunderstorm, the supercell that was moving into Fort Smith, moved that direction, the radar beam was too high to detect any rotation, so the only thing they could issue was a severe thunderstorm warning. And I told everybody, just treat this like a tornado warning regardless. It's been too tornadic for too long. Just err on the side of caution, and that would be your best bet on that. But at a certain point in time, your station managers want you to get back to a regular programming, not at the cost of the safety of the public, but they want you to make certain that you get back to regular programming when you can. So it's a matter of numbers at some point in time, to where the farther you go away from your signal, the less people are actually watching you, and then at some point you have to dump it back to regular programming, and the next station, the next market will be taking over for that, kind of like what you see here, to where one warning officer will take over from the last one depending on which direction the storm is moving.
Yeah, I'll show this screenshot again here. This is a tornado warning / severe thunderstorm warning, basically for 2 different county warning areas. I believe it was Wilmington, Ohio, and the West Virginia office that this bordered on. But basically, the storm is right here, and the path of that storm is moving to the east. The red is the tornado warning, and that storm is going to cut right across the state border there into this severe thunderstorm warning area. And actually, when it first came out, the tornado warning came out, in this kind of bridge shape right here. There was nothing in the area where the storm was going to pass through in the adjoining state, and they did issue severe thunderstorm warning to kind of cover it. But I mean, how confusing is that? Not only for a broadcaster to explain that, but for the public to understand why is it right across the river here? They're in a tornado warning while I'm in a severe thunderstorm warning. It's just one of the more blatant examples, I think. And the problem with this is the Weather Service that issued this tornado warning is not authorized to issue within this area where the severe thunderstorm warning was. So they can't put a polygon out that covers the whole path. Again, we see that around in this area as well. And it's everywhere. Rick will attest to this as well. Is when you've got storms that cross that county warning area boundary, you have to be able to hand that off to the next office downstream and coordinate. I still see rotation in this, and do you see it too? And let's make sure that we get these warnings right, because otherwise, if you, heaven forbid, you live on the edge of a county warning area, there's probably confusion half the time.
And then also there was that case. It wasn't more than about a couple of weeks ago, to where I can't remember if it was Ari Salsari or the gentleman from Boston, WBZ. They posted a graphic somewhere down in South Georgia to where the temperature on one side was 90 degrees, and then so was the angle of the actual isotherms on the National Weather Service map. So it looked like, the 80s took a right turn at Atlanta, and there wasn't any, it didn't make any sense to see that geometric a pattern going on. But that's what happens with some of these models.
I think what happens too is we forget that folks like Rick are people, and that there are personalities and local knowledge in play. And Rick may see something on a radar and interpret it differently than Eric, who's in the adjoining forecast office. So I think that's where what some of you're talking about the handing off, I think that's where, I don't know if that can be improved, because then you take the entire personal element out of it and say, well, just issue tornado warnings. But Rick will see something different than another forecaster, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just, it does put the public in some danger. In some ways, that's even worse than not issuing a warning at all, is having a warning like that, where, half of the county should be under a tornado warning, and, the forecaster begrudgingly probably says, well, I got to go ahead and issue a severe thunderstorm warning, just for consistency, so.
And I think you're getting to one of the big challenges with the consistency. It is the people issue. It is the meteorologists, the pride, meteorologists take pride in their forecast, and you hear that all the time. This is my forecast. Forecasters put their name or initials at the bottom of it, the AFD or whatever, and that's good. I mean, you want to have professional pride, and you're proud of your abilities and your skills. The challenge is moving from this being my forecast or Rick's forecast to being our forecast. It has to be the National Weather Service's forecast, and not just the National Weather Service in Memphis's forecast. It has to be the National Weather Service in Memphis and Little Rock and Paducah and Jackson and Nashville and Huntsville and everybody around. We have to get into that mindset, and that's hard to do. I mean, it's hard to do in any endeavor, I think. And not just meteorology, to get people to come together and say, well, yeah, I know that model says 50, but I really think 40. I've seen this happen before, and there's varying levels of experience. And so I think that's, technology. We've got all kinds of technology. You could do the forecast for the entire country from one spot right now if you wanted to. Would it be a good forecast? I don't think so. You need that local expertise. It's not the technology that's the challenge. It's the people and the culture, and that's where we are right now. That's one of the big things that we're dealing with, is how do we move beyond this being my forecast to this being our forecast, the Weather Service forecast.
Rick, just one quick question. How many people, and this is the uneducated consumer part of me, how many people touch a forecast from the National Weather Service before it goes out the door?
On a particular, let's just say the day shift today at pick a Weather Service office, there were probably 2 meteorologists who were working. Usually the way it's different in every office. In our particular office, one person is kind of mainly concerned with the short term, say from now through the next 24 hours or so. The other forecaster is concerned with everything else. So in our office, there would be 2 people touching the forecast. There would be one touching the short term, and then the bulk of the forecast would be done by another forecaster. The long term, or we used to call it the public desk, or I don't know. There's different terms for it within the Weather Service. So generally, it's like that. But we're also there's also collaboration going on, that we have internal chat rooms, not NWS chat, but there's another chat room that we use to communicate and coordinate not only with our neighboring offices, but also with the WPC, the Weather Prediction Center, the Storm Prediction Center, the Hurricane Center if need be, the regions, the regional headquarters at times are in there, helping to kind of helping us to coordinate better and collaborate. So it's a team effort coming out of the office. I mean, there may be one person who's manipulating the graphical forecast editor and producing that forecast, but it's a collaborative effort of everyone in the office and people even outside the office.
Good. Let's take this a little bit in the direction of the watch warning process specifically then, I guess. And I failed to mention at the beginning, but let me throw it in here now for anybody that's watching and has questions or comments regarding anything we're talking about. Feel free to hit us on Twitter, the WX chat, hashtag weather chat. We'll be monitoring that. So if you got questions, feel free to put them in there, or if you're watching on the MemphisWeather.net website, we've got a chat box on there as well. So as far as the watch warning process. So this is kind of where I think the Weather Service was already kind of looking in this direction anyway. We've got new social science that's being involved over the last actually probably increasing amounts, but over the last few years, and public perception, public response, and so when this bill was changed to basically focus more on making sure that the watch warning process works and that it elicits response is probably the best way. You can always lead the horse to water. There's a certain number of horses that aren't going to drink, but if you say it just right, maybe you can get a larger percentage to respond accordingly. What? I guess let's just start by showing something here. This will kind of give you an idea. Let me screen share one more time. I think this will be a good starting place. I don't think anybody disagrees that the watch warning process of the National Weather Service is fairly convoluted right now. There are so many different watches and warnings and everything out there. This is basically the legend for the watch warning map from the National Weather Service, and these are all of the different types of watches, warnings, advisories, statements. I think I heard there's like 124 different colors that might appear on that watch warning map. So we have a communication issue, I think, right off the front of what does all this mean. Not every area that you live in is going to have to worry about every single one of those. We don't have marine warnings here in Memphis. They don't have, well, rarely a winter storm warning in Miami, I guess. But we have all of these different options, and so the Weather Service is issuing these watches, warnings, and advisories to try and let the public know at varying levels of certainty and urgency what is going to be affecting their area, and I think there's a lot of confusion out there. And I think one of the classic examples that's actually been cited by the Weather Service in a kind of a post-mortem that they did on the Atlanta snow jam or ice jam last year was the transition for the area from a winter storm watch to a winter weather advisory, and most people didn't think that was an upgrade of the warning, that was actually that the advisory was worse than the watch, but it is. And so I think we've got this communication issue that has to be looked at. So, Rick, I guess I'll start again with you from the perspective of issuing of these. I know you guys understand all of the terms and all of the types of things that you're supposed to issue and the different criteria that a watch versus an advisory versus a statement or whatever is. How difficult is that for you to get the message across when you have all of these different options at your disposal?
Well, you're making a big assumption there, Eric. You said that we understand all of this. I'm gonna make a confession. We had a lot of flooding back in May, and we did a kind of a hot wash or an after action review in our office last week to kind of go over it and see what worked, what didn't, what can we do better. One of the things as I was preparing for that meeting is I was looking at all the different flash flood products that we issue. And I looked at that for about 5 minutes, and then I realized I don't even completely understand how all that works. I found that in May we had issued products I didn't even know that existed. So it's complicated. If it's complicated for us and all of us that are on this panel right now, think about the poor people out there that are just watching television trying to know, are my kids going to have to go to school tomorrow? Do I need to, move the cattle to higher ground? Whatever your decision is. So it's a challenge, and I mean, we think about it, and I've said for a long time, if I was the made the dictator or the czar or the king or whatever, one of the things I would consider doing is just having one hazardous weather product, and here's a bad weather message. Here's what's coming. Here's how bad it's going to be. Here's when it's going to get there. Here's when it's going to leave. Instead of deciding, well, if it's 3.6 inches, then we're going to issue a winter weather advisory. If it gets to 4 inches, we're going to issue a warning. I know that's probably not realistic, but the Weather Service is looking seriously now. There is a effort going on called hazard simplification. Hazardous product simplification really is what it is, to kind of simplify or look at ways we can simplify. I went to the AMS Broadcasters Conference in Raleigh, and I know saw Jim Jaggers there, and it was good to see him, and Dave Brown as well. And that was one of the big topics. We had people there from New Zealand, we had people there from Great Britain, we had people there from Canada. The Weather Service is looking everywhere that we can to get ideas and to see how other people are doing it. Are there other systems in place? Are there words to use? And Weather Service has a history of tweaking things and just saying, well, we'll add this advisory or we'll change the way. We haven't made any huge changes to things in a long, long time. And that's one of the things that some are proposing is just, start all over, start from scratch, and how, if we could build a perfect weather warning system or weather messaging system, what would it look like? So I think looking toward the future, this is the most serious effort I've seen. I've been in the Weather Service for nearly, let's see, how long has it been? It's been a long time, nearly 25 years, I guess. I've never seen a more serious effort and more experts, not just meteorologists talking to ourselves, but communications experts, social scientists, all those kinds of people are getting together and seriously looking at how to fix it.
I think you do raise a really good point, Rick. I'm what we call ourselves, weather nerd. But even I get confused when, I had to ask Eric. I'll never forget this. About a year ago, I didn't know the difference between a flood warning and a flood advisory for the river. It was like there were two different shades, one shade of green next to another one, and I was like, break this down for me. And I think that, Eric, a buddy of mine on Twitter, and I were joking around the other day about the Ron White system of preparedness. Get a helmet, put on the helmet. And it's funny, it's a joke, but I think that in some cases that's more the right direction. And Austin, I know that's probably one of your challenges, is relaying, how bad is this a put on a helmet type of event versus, this thing's probably not as strong, and polygons I think have helped that. But I know that's one of your challenges, is actually relaying the seriousness of a tornado warning to the public.
It is, and the whole watch warning controversy idea about making certain that people understand more about which one is the worst one on there. But there's been a couple of times to where it's taken us by surprise too. One was during Hurricane Katrina, when the National Weather Service had the remnants of Katrina spinning up from the Gulf of Mexico. It was no longer a tropical storm. It was no longer a hurricane, but it wasn't not a tropical storm technically either. So all of a sudden, this brand new sort of olive green color appears with an inland tropical storm warning. We'd never seen that before, so we had to explain to the public what was going on there. And about maybe, 4, 5, 6, maybe a little bit more years ago than that, we had a freezing fog advisory issued. And we had people emailing us at WREG saying, "You're making that up. There is no such thing as you're just trying to get more ratings." Like, no, this is real. And every time the National Weather Service posted, we have to put a graphic up there showing, okay, this is it, link to it, and say, because we inevitably will have people saying that we're making it up. We're not. It's a real warning.
Yeah, I specifically remember that one too, because the question I got was not obviously are you doing this for ratings, but is what in the heck is this? I've never heard of, how can fog freeze? And now you get into a scientific explanation and a great blog topic on exactly what that is and how that works. And there's instances where, speaking from the aviation sector as well, we've had issues in the past with things where you don't get fog, but you get dew, and then the temperature drops below freezing, and so you get frozen dew. Well, the visibility was great, so it's not a freezing fog advisory, but I've got ice, and nothing was falling from the sky. So do you make up another product to cover that, or do you have just a statement that says this is what is expected, this is how it's going to impact you, and I think that's where a lot of that kind of needs to go, as Rick was pointing out, is sometimes we need to focus more on or less on what is the name of what is going on, and more on this is how it's going to affect you and this is when. We've got one of those products is the significant weather advisory that is used as basically just under the severe thunderstorm warning level, and we get those frequently. We're going to get 40 or 50 mile an hour winds, and so significant weather advisory comes out. And I can tell you that I very rarely will use that term when I'm nowcasting or tweeting out what's going on. I will say that this storm is going to produce 40 to 50 mile an hour winds in your area, and you need to stay away from windows or go indoors or whatever, because there's no point in confusing people with another thing that then I have to go back and explain what the definition of that term is.
And I can understand more also about what Mr. Rick is going through too, because going from a Memphis-centric weather view, Hurricane Elvis, when that hit back in 2003, there was the issue, well, why didn't you issue a tornado warning? Well, why didn't you issue something specific for this, like a high wind warning or something like that? Well, it was neither here nor there, as I understand it. And the severe thunderstorm warning technically would have covered it, but there was no tornado. It was just high-speed winds. But is that another warning that needs to be considered at some point? A derecho warning? Maybe that's in the offing somewhere.
And things like that have actually been talked about. An extreme wind warning, and I think that's still in the toolbox for coastal offices if they want to issue that for the eye wall of a hurricane. It's maybe not a tornado, but it's more than just gusty 60 mile an hour winds, and so yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we're talking about simplifying things and not having as many, but there's an argument that maybe we don't have enough. We don't have products, or sometimes it's hard to. Something's happening that we don't have a bin to put it in, or we don't have a product to explain it, and that's when it gets challenging for us and the media and everybody else, I think.
I think a great example of that is Sandy. What do you do with Hurricane Sandy? Is it technically a hurricane? Probably not. But then the challenge is, and Rick, you know this better most, if you don't call it a hurricane warning, people aren't going to take the proper level of action. So, but then you run the risk of, at the end of the day, you guys are all scientists. At the end of the day, above and beyond everything else, meteorology is the study of the atmosphere, and you're all scientists, and scientists are bound by science. But sometimes, like with Sandy, things like you said, they don't fit in a little bin where you can go, oh, this is a hurricane. Well, it wasn't really, but still they needed those hurricane warnings because, what was it, Port Battery in New York City got, like a 19-foot storm surge. You tell those folks that are underwater, oh, that wasn't a hurricane. And the same thing, Austin brought up a good point with Hurricane Elvis here. It wasn't a tornado, but you tell the people that were without power for 4.5 weeks that a tornado didn't go down their neighborhood road and destroy their neighborhood. So this is where science and communication kind of have found the battleground, it seems like, is here in the weather community now.
And to the credit of the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center, after Sandy, they were listening, and that message came out very loud and clear. And the Weather Service was, even though it's a government agency, was fairly nimble in their response to that. And that should not, at least by the new rules and stuff, happen again, where they just decide that even though the hurricane is still out there, by the time it makes landfall, it's going to be something else, and so we'll use a different warning. So hopefully that helps. But I think there's a lot of things that can be done. Are there certain changes maybe that are those pieces of low-hanging fruit out there that would kind of help us along this process without maybe going to, let's just take this whole thing and dump it in the trash can and start over? I think that maybe some of that is in those the flood or the winter weather type products. There are so many different winter weather products out there. Maybe that's one of those that's easy to start with.
Yeah, and the Weather Service just went through and pruned the winter weather products not that terribly long ago. I mean, we used to have sleet advisories, freezing. Well, I guess we still have a freezing rain advisory, but you had a snow advisory, a sleet advisory, a sleet and snow advisory. He had he had a much longer list of products in the winter weather suite not that long ago. So we pruned that. We pruned that not too long ago. I think one of the things that's in the works right now is the hydro products, is the flash flood suite of products. And I know there's concerted effort. There's been meetings and teams and focus groups and things like that looking at that. And I saw a report recently on some progress on that. So I know that's a progress. That's something that's in the works. So yeah, it's and I don't want you to think that that's what we're doing, that we're just going to scrap everything and start over, but everything's on the table at this point. But as we're looking longer term at simplifying the whole suite of hazardous weather products from the Weather Service, we are doing things as we go along to hopefully make them more understandable, make them more useful for everybody. And somebody mentioned in the chat, John mentioned in the chat the term traveler's advisory. Anybody remember traveler's advisories back when that was the thing? Well, you know what? Every TV station in Oklahoma City still calls them traveler's advisories. Nobody calls them here a winter weather advisory if we issue one. I don't think any of the stations do. I know at least 2 of the stations call them traveler's advisories. Why do they do that? Because that's what it is. It's an advisory for travelers primarily, and they are, maybe they're onto something. I don't know. If you traveler's advisory, that kind of gets your attention as well. I'm traveling. This is some advice maybe I need to listen to. So anyway, I'm rambling a little bit there, but there are. You mentioned low-hanging fruit. We are working on some of that right now in the Weather Service.
I think that we've also seen, again, kind of going back to the social side of it, that we're seeing more of that coming into even some of just the way that the warnings are worded and so forth as well. I think I've seen some pretty good examples of how you take a severe thunderstorm warning from a year ago and you compare it to a severe thunderstorm warning from 1975, and the only difference between the two is the date stamp, and they're still in all caps, and all of that. And with the impact-based warning process that we've talked about a little bit before, the IBWs, where they're basically depending on the severity of the storm, it may be still a severe thunderstorm warning or tornado warning, but the Weather Service can now adjust the wording in those to describe a little better exactly what type of scenario we're dealing with. Is it a radar-indicated tornado, or is it a public confirmed tornado? The wording can be adjusted such that they're basically, again, trying to elicit the response of the individuals that are out there. And tornado warnings are one of those where whether they like it or not, really, it's we've got a nationwide false alarm rate of about 80% on those tornado warnings, and again, that depends on how you mush the statistics around and stuff. But that's just the truth of the matter. And so, how do we make sure that when people understand that 4 out of the 5 times the sirens go off, they really don't have to worry about anything? How do you get them to respond when that time is right, and they really do?
But, hey, Eric, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Did the Memphis office started doing the impact-based warnings this past spring? Is that right? I was just curious. I'd like to ask Austin. I don't know how much whether you had or how many opportunities you had, but I'm just curious what you thought about the impact-based warnings. Did they help you in your job as a broadcaster, or how do you use those, or did you get much of a chance to?
We did, and it did help out, I think, a little bit. I think there's good and bad about both of that in a couple of senses. Number one, about the fact that it does narrow things down so that you can tell people, and with our product that we have, Weather Call, we have people call in and say, well, this was issued for my area, but I didn't get the phone call warning me about what was going on. We'd have to tell them that they were just outside of that polygonal warning area and that they weren't included with that. So if we have enough opportunity to mark it down and to say to everybody out there, this area, this town, this city, this street is all included, but this, and are not, I think you're going to be able to kind of trim some of the confusion out there, which is going to help out ultimately getting more people to safety, minus, of course, kind of what Eric was talking about the overblown with the tornado warnings and the idea that it's not going to happen to you. Alternatively, I have heard a lot of condemnation from general public and otherwise, especially with the Weather Channel, and on other networks like CBS, NBC, where it has the information down at the bottom of the screen saying, 300 million people affected by this. That data on there, as it gets presented, that is, I would expect that one seeming to be taken as a little bit more overblown on that type of thing. But for a point-to-point warning, I think it helps because it's going to be an ability to make certain more people stay safe and say, oh, well, I know where that is, and it's not here, or it is here. That way they're going to get to safety that much quicker because they know more about what's in that area because that's localized around where they live, work, play, whatever.
Yeah. Hey, Eric, Austin, a question for you guys because you guys are kind of the weather enterprise people. Do you think that at some point it becomes a little cumbersome for National Weather Service folks to be experts in the science and the communication of it? Do you think some of that maybe we're expecting a little too much from the NWS, where you guys are the communicators, that's part of what you do, that's your job is communication, and is the NWS maybe at a crossroads to where they've kind of got to decide, are we going to be an information dissemination organization, or are we going to continue this kind of hybrid communication? Because let's be honest, people are going to turn to Eric and Austin when they get that tornado warning on their phone. They're unless they're me, they're not going to go look at the text from the NWS, their TV channel or their Twitter. They're going to open Twitter and see what you guys are saying. So are we maybe a little unfair with the NWS about the communication aspect? And maybe that's something the enterprise should be more responsible for.
I'll let Eric start off on this one.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that while the Weather Service's I guess primary responsibility is to provide the data and make sure and provide the forecast, some of the end products related to the raw data. I think that they are also the ones that are perhaps have the most opportunity to evaluate that data, to be looking at it on a consistent basis, and to be able to provide the type of communication methods, using the type of communication methods they have to get that information out to the public. And with the weather services all on Facebook and Twitter and everything now as well, they're the ones that are putting out the warnings. If I want to find out why we're under a tornado warning or why this area might be under a severe weather threat today, well, I'm going to be looking to the broadcasters and the private sector and so forth. I think that going to the horse's mouth is the best way to start. Now, certainly you're going to have others, like myself or like the broadcasters that are taking that information, massaging it, and basically putting it maybe in a little bit different format, or ways that the public can take that information in a different way than what the Weather Service is providing. So I think there's room for both. Does the Weather Service necessarily need to be starting up their own television stations and going wall to wall during tornado warnings? I don't know. That doesn't. It seems like that sector is pretty well covered, but I'm not going to be the one to say no, that they don't need to be doing that, because they're the ones issuing the warnings. So.
There's also the idea that I think for reinventing the wheel type of activity, to where the National Weather Service does what it does very well. If we're talking about shrinking the National Weather Service down, which is what this bill started off being to begin with, we're going to be seeing a lot of places going to have to re-modernize in a way. That was kind of clunky English, but I apologize for that. But in the meantime, you're going to have to get a lot more people who are in the National Weather Service vein, a little bit more in the mathematics, physics, science of it all, learning more about how to communicate on social media, which the National Weather Service in Memphis has done quite well with things like
Yeah.
Twitter and Facebook, reaching out to the public, doing a very good job. Things like that. Corps of Engineers in Memphis does a very good job. Things like that. Government agencies really starting to get into it. But when it comes to anything like competing with local media, if that's something they really want to do, they're going to have to put a full-fledged effort into that, and I'm not sure that cutting back on the amount of offices from the legislative bill is going to accomplish all of that at that time. And also, it may even actually cut into the efficiency of the National Weather Service in its own way, issuing the warnings, the data, the information, without any superfluous, join us on Twitter tonight, added into the area of discussion, area forecast discussion, might be a bit of a mistake on that. So it seems to be that there's good and bad ways about it both ways, but it's, in my opinion, it might be a little bit overreaching for the National Weather Service to be expecting to get into that sort of business for that. Public outreach, yes. Anything more than that, interpreting that as a separate YouTube channel might be a little bit much.
If I could, let me turn this over to ask William as well, because he's you know, in the getting through the education of learning how to be the meteorologist now and going into the Weather Service. How much emphasis are you getting, or as far as your classes and stuff are concerned, on how to communicate and being able to be ready to do that sort of thing, whether it's social media or, you know, being able to communicate in different ways when you get into the Weather Service?
Yeah, a lot of our classes now, the discussion ends up focusing on the communication aspect of meteorology, because, you know, we're getting to the point with the science where, you know, obviously we don't know everything, but we're doing much better than we were many years ago with the forecasting, the warnings, and all that. So now a lot of the focus shifts on to, you know, kind of like we were talking about, the watches and warnings, the advisories, like how is the public perceiving that? How are they receiving the information? How are they interpreting it? All that stuff. So I think those are really good questions, and especially John's question about how much does the Weather Service, like how responsible are they for making sure the public understands that stuff? Maybe that is more left up to, you know, private agencies like MemphisWeather.net and you know, the broadcast sector. I think it's a good question, but that's my opinion, I guess.
Okay, Rick?
Yeah, I think it's a good question too, and I really don't know the answer to it. I mean, personally, I think, and that's another debate that you see on social media inside the Weather Service and discussion groups and things like that. Is, you know, there's a chunk of Weather Service forecasters who say, I got this job because I wanted to be a meteorologist. I wanted to be a forecaster. I want to forecast the weather. I don't want to be a sociologist or a social psychologist or a human geographer or anything like that. I want to be a forecaster, a meteorologist. And there's something to be said for that. But personally, I think that for us to do our job, I mean, you can sit on a forecast desk and pump out a forecast without really having to know much of that stuff, you know, the routine forecast. But when that phone rings, and it's an emergency manager or a public safety official or even a TV meteorologist who's needing something interpreted, part of our job is being interpreters, just like it is, Eric, your job, and Austin, your job, and others. You know, our job is to be both a scientist and a communicator, and we have to do that too. Part of our role is to communicate, and so I think that's a critical skill, and I'm glad William talked about, you know, that they are talking about that in their classes, because it's I think the days of just coming out and being a really strong forecaster in meteorology, that I think you need more. I think you need to be a good communicator in all different ways to be able to interpret or relate, explain to people what a 20% chance of rain means, or to explain to people what the, you know, are you going to get 6 inches of snow or 12 inches of snow, and why. And so I think that it's a good question, and I don't think there's a right answer, but it is generating a lot of discussion. And I wanted to go back real quick too and talk about the TV thing. I know that there was an article and some things that came out about, you know, Weather Service in Birmingham is setting up a TV studio and all this. I think that really got overblown, actually, and I don't know anybody in the Weather Service that has any any ambitions of being in television. Austin, what you guys do, the more I get to know our TV meteorologist here, the more amazed and impressed and in awe I am, and the more I know that I got into the right part of meteorology. I don't want any part of that. And I don't know anybody at the Weather Service that does. I mean, honest, I'm not, and not to say anything bad about TV. It's just you have to have special skills and special talent to do that. And there is nobody in the Weather Service I know of that has any goals or ambitions to have a TV network or to take over anything. Do we want a better looking place to do Skype interviews with the Weather Channel if they call, or if a local TV station calls, or somebody in a distant market calls that they don't want to send a camera crew 3.5 hours to do a 2-minute interview? Sure, we'd like to have that. Do we want to have a better set up maybe to do some educational videos and outreach? Sure, but as far as join us at 9 for the latest forecast, or we're going wall to wall with severe weather coverage live from WFO Norman, that's not happening as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that's not a goal or an ambition or anything. So there's no worries about any of that, as far as, unless there's a secret plan being hatched somewhere. That got a little overblown, I think, when that came out.
Well, and I've been in the Weather Service office here in Memphis as well, and I know that they've got the HD webcams, and they've got kind of a professional-looking lighting setup. It's not like a TV studio by any means, but that just basically enables them to enhance the quality of what they're providing to folks as well. And if they're doing a YouTube video that's an explainer, or if they're doing, in fact, we had an online Skywarn storm spotter training not too long ago, and being able to have that information, it's no good to the public if they're watching on YouTube this going on and they can't see, or because of the low definition of the computer screen they're looking at, they can't tell what's being displayed on the screen. There's a certain level of quality you really have to be able to effectively get your message across. So I think that's where a lot of that will be used. And knowing what the staffing levels and so forth are in the Weather Service as well, I don't think there's any way that at current levels, and I don't know of anybody that's proposing hiring another 1,000 meteorologists out there at the Weather Service to do wall-to-wall coverage, and that's their job is to do that. It's not going to happen. Yep. And for those that aren't aware, I think anything that proposes centralizing and restructuring in a way that is going to cause a loss of jobs in the Weather Service is asinine, to be honest. The Weather Service does an immense amount on a very small budget. If you compare it to the rest of the government agencies that are out there, I did a quick computation earlier today, and I don't know if this is exactly right, but it came out to somewhere around $17.25 per year that each individual in the United States pays for the Weather Service. Tell me you're not getting your money's worth out of that. It is. You guys do a very, very good job, very effective at what you do, and it's the best $17.25 I've paid in taxes in a real long time. So it's definitely worth every penny that's been done. So.
Well, there's a question to the group too. I mean, at this point in time, the bill looks like it's dead for the time being, if I read everything correctly, but it is a possibility that it is going to be cycling back through again at some point. When somebody gets the impetus to get that done again, is there any possibility of that happening later this year, or is it pretty much dead for the semester term? Or
I don't know. I'm not a congressional expert or anything like that, and I'm speaking on my own voice here, my own time. But I don't see anything else coming up this budget year. I mean, we're into July, and we're looking at if things go according to schedule, there's not a whole lot more time to be introducing major things. There's some speculation among some in the weather community that this was just a trial thing to get discussion going, and there was even the Washington Post had a quote from the senator that introduced that this was just a discussion starter, and so I'm sure this will come up again. It's come up before. Different congressmen from different states with different constituents have introduced similar bills like this before. There was a plan, or not a plan, but a talk or rumblings several years ago about doing something similar. So I don't know. I don't think it's gone forever. I mean, what we find in the Weather Service is things tend to go in big circles. So someday I could see a day coming, and I'm totally making this up. There's no plans. I don't know anything, but maybe you have one forecast office in every state, and maybe you put a forecast office in Memphis, and you have little offices in Nashville and Chattanooga and Morristown or Knoxville and Tri-Cities. No, I'm just everything goes in circles. So there's not a lot of new discussions that come up, but I'm not, as a Weather Service employee, I'm not worried about any substantial changes to our structure or anything. Now, we'll tell you, and I don't want to talk too much, but I got one more thing I want to throw in here, that as that bill was being introduced, as the news about that came out, the Weather Service was undergoing a study. So they have a management consultant group, McKinsey and Company, that is going around, and they are interviewing Weather Service offices, and they are doing a huge workforce study to help the Weather Service determine what will the future of the Weather Service look like. And so the bill really came out before that study even got started. And they came and visited our office, and they're going to go visit lots of other offices and talk to the media and emergency management and other people about what we do, what resources we need to do our job, how we do it, all that kind of stuff. So that's just beginning, and that's a year-long study that's going on. So you'll hear about this, and at some point there'll be a report that comes out. And then I think when that report comes out and the Weather Service and Congress and everybody starts looking at that, then I think we'll start to think a little bit more seriously about potential changes. Again, the study just started, so who knows what they're going to say. But that is something that's in the works in the Weather Service right now, is this workforce utilization. I can't remember the exact terms for it. People keep comparing it to Office Space. If you've seen the movie Office Space, where the Bobs come in and interview people, and it's not like that at all. But they were very nice people, and I don't think that's what they're there for. But anyway, watch. There'll be more on that, but I don't see anything big happening as far as big dramatic changes in the Weather Service for quite some time, mainly because that study is just starting.
As long as that study comes out and says that we need to put more balloons up at more locations across the United States and put them off every 3 hours, I'm all in favor of that. So,
tell me about it.
I think John had one final question he wanted to ask, and then we're going to wrap this up.
Yeah, William, just wanted to ask you a quick question, being the baby of the group here. How seriously, because I think we're all talking on our level today, how seriously do people in your age group, maybe a little bit younger, where are they in the watch warning process? Do they care? Is it more of is it going to hit my house? If not, I'm not really worried about it. Because I think that's where we kind of need to be planning too, is not just for folks like me and Eric and Austin and Rick, but your age group is about to be the next homeowner, the next weather consumer, for lack of a better term. So how do people in your age group, do they even really care? Do they pay much attention?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess it's kind of hard to observe from the position I'm in, because most of my friends, as soon as they figure out, I'm the meteorologist, they just message me for everything. So that's their way of figuring out the information. But other than that, as far as I know from general people my age, more people are into social media and stuff like that. So the Weather Service is doing a great job of hopping on that, like some of you guys have mentioned. And I think that's the way it's going with younger people. I mean, less people are watching TV, more are on social media. So.
Yeah, good response. All right. We'll get ready to wrap it up here. Does anybody have any last comments that they'd like to make tonight? I'll just go right down the row if anybody's got anything. Austin, any closing comments?
I'd like to thank you for inviting me to this, and it'd be great to do more topics if at all possible down the line. It's been wonderful hanging out with everybody and discussing this. I, in some ways, wasn't even aware of the bill being passed until you sent the information along to me, so it was nice to get some research done on that so that I could find out a little bit more about this, and it's been a pleasure to meet everybody in the lineup for tonight. So thank you very much for letting me chime in for all this.
Yeah, appreciate you joining us tonight. Thanks, Austin. It's good to have somebody from the broadcast side that can kind of provide their perspective as well. It's you're one of the one of those that's out on the forefront, the first place that a lot of people turn when weather is going south, so or north or west, whichever way the weather's moving. But glad. Thank you so much for being available tonight. John, I'll turn to you. Any final thoughts?
No, just thanks, and I'll just say that on the whole, the National Weather Service, the broadcast sector, and your sector, kind of the weather enterprise, are doing a great job of communicating to the public. And like from the NWS perspective, the impact-based warnings, those are so much better than the generic tornado warnings. And I think that we're Eric, where you come into play that's so great is you focus on a very specific area that the largest portion of our population resides in, and that's something that NWS Memphis can't do. And then I think what Austin's team and the Weather TV enterprise does a great job of is they are geographically knowledgeable. They can tell people, all these little podunk towns that may not, cold Arkansas may not mean anything to me, but to somebody who lives in Wynn, that means everything. And that's the difference between taking warning seriously and not. So I think that as a whole, and we have gotten so much better, not just technology-wise, but I think communication-wise. I think people are really, we're honing it in, and we're almost there, and just maybe a few more tweaks. And, and if it saves one life, that's worth all the struggle and all the headache and all the yelling and screaming that we do, and just because at the end of the day, that's what it's about, is keeping people safe from all perspectives.
Great, thanks, John. Appreciate you joining us as well tonight, and all the times that you've been on a hangout with us. Appreciate your opinions and questions as well. Rick, thanks so much for being on tonight. Do you have any closing comments?
Well, thank you for having me. This is really cool, and I was just sitting here thinking how awesome this is to be able to get together and talk about weather. If this would have been available, if this had been something I could do as a 12-year-old from my basement in Olive Branch, Mississippi, back in the day, I would have totally been doing this probably nightly. I mean, this is so cool to be able to do this. And Eric, I appreciate you're pulling this together, and you got a great panel together. And I'm proud to be from Memphis. I appreciate everything that goes on there. I look back, and from Memphis Weather to all the TV stations and all the great work that they're doing there, it's really cool to be able to look back and see all the neat stuff going on in the weather community there. And I think it's important to discuss and get people. It's not just the Weather Service, not just the media. I mean, we're all on the same team, I think, and we all kind of have to get along and work together. And I think the more we talk and get things out in the open, the better it is. So I appreciate you giving us all the opportunity to do that, and good to see you on Austin. I think we've talked on Twitter. I've never met you in person, but and John and William, I wish you a lot of luck in your career, and hope you get that paperwork filled out here pretty soon.
Good. Thank you again, Rick, for offering your time tonight. I know you're busy with a lot of different things. If you want to hear more of Rick, tune in on Monday nights to Weather Brains. There's a great discussion that goes on every week. A lot of different topics covered, and Rick is one of the panelists on there, regular panelists every week. So we'll throw in a plug for them too, because it's a great show as well. William, thanks a lot for joining us from out on the Pacific Coast. You got any final thoughts for us tonight?
No problem. I just kind of want to echo, I guess, what Rick said, that it's really awesome that we can get together and discuss this stuff, and that's really always what we're doing. And I think that says a really positive thing about our industry and everything, is that all of us can come together from these different sectors and talk about making these improvements. So I think it's a great thing that we're working towards improvements, and that it's only a positive thing that we're always reconsidering how we do things. So.
Yeah, that's the only way to achieve change and to move forward is to explore a little bit, have some discussion about it, and hear what others have to think as well. So appreciate all of you joining us again tonight. And so I'll wrap it up by just saying appreciate everybody who's listening tonight, or if you're catching this later on YouTube, thanks a lot for sticking with us through this as well. We had a pretty productive discussion, and I know there's a lot of things that we didn't touch on tonight that would be good topics for future discussions as well. So be looking for those, and that'll about do it. So appreciate everybody joining us. You can find all the weather information from all the broadcasters here in the Memphis area, as well as the National Weather Service in Memphis, NWS Memphis on Twitter and on Facebook. We are Memphis Weather 1, Memphis Weather the number 1 on Twitter, MemphisWeather.net on Facebook. Check out our mobile apps, and everybody stay safe in the next several days as we get thunderstorms rolling through here. So everybody have a good night, and we'll talk to you again later. Bye-bye.